Good morning. So we've been on this series of Nehemiah. We've had several sermons about what Nehemiah was doing, rebuilding the Jerusalem wall. So I want to start going on with this week as well. So we're going to talk about Nehemiah 3. But my first question to you is, how many of you have built a fort? Like, legitimately built a fort. Maybe you remember it as a child, or maybe you've been an adult helping your kids build a fort. So I remember, now this seems like yesterday, but it's actually 5 years ago when COVID hit. And I can't believe it's been that long already. But anyways, so we were all in the house because we all had to stay inside, right? And so the kids are bored and we're like, well, what are we going to do? And the kids are like, hey, let's build a fort. So what do you need to build a fort? Well, first off, you need floor space, right? And tons of it. You need to grab blankets, maybe pillows. You need to rearrange the furniture, kitchen table, chairs, stuff like that. Like, you just need a lot of stuff. So you're grabbing all this stuff, and then all of a sudden, like, oh, how are we going to build this? So you kind of scheme up it with the kids, and where are the chairs going to go? Where are the blankets going to go? So the kids already kind of have a vision of how they want that fort built. But, as a parent helping them, like, no, that's not going to work. This is going to work. That's not going to work. So, with a little help from dad or mom, or both of them, some clothespins, the weight of a few pillows, a couple of knots tied in the right places on their chairs, that fort is complete. And because me being a dad, I got to test the quality first. So that means I have to go in there and test it out. And then they kick me out. That's usually how it goes. So usually that leads to hours of fun, and most likely it's going to be the sleepover night. That's how the kids, the kids will probably sleep in the fort at nighttime, right? So everybody's having fun, but what eventually happens? Somebody bumps a chair, somebody stands up, knocks a blanket around, shifts it, something happens. So part of that fort collapses. Who's to the rescue? Mom and dad, right? And here's the deal. When that fort falls, it's usually in the most awkward spot that you can't get to. So you have to, as an adult, have to climb over something or climb through something to fix it. And there's always something that requires something, whether you're climbing over pillows or ducking under blankets or stretching just in the weirdest way just to fix that area. It's frustrating, but with the kids' help, it gets done. But how does this all come together in the first place? Well, somebody had a vision. Somebody had an idea of something to do, a determination to build something from nothing. So all the resources were gathered, a vision took shape, and most importantly, it wasn't done just by one person, because you need somebody that's going to be grabbing one area of the blanket while somebody's holding the other area of the blanket down so it doesn't, come undone, right? So somebody had to adjust the chairs, and somebody had to work on the entryway. There was a shared purpose and a collective effort to see that fort being completed. And now that you think about it, that actually required a lot of bit of work, but it was fun at the same time, right? And it's something that you and your kids, or as a kid, if you're hanging out with your friends and doing it, you can look at it and say, hey, we built this thing together, right? It's cool. So last week, we heard about the importance of starting the work even though there is opposition. We saw Nehemiah arrive in Jerusalem. He surveyed the damage, and he realized how much work actually needed to be done. But he didn't rush through it. Just like building a fort, he took time to prepare, gathered all the things that he needed to gather, plan, understood the details. And once he was ready, he called certain people into action. But we also saw that not everyone was excited about the work. There were those who stood with Nehemiah, and then there were also those who mocked and questioned Nehemiah. But Nehemiah still declared, the God of heaven will help us succeed. And that was in Nehemiah 2:20. So that brings us to today. Because once the work started, the real test began. Rebuilding wasn't just about laying down bricks. It was about perseverance, unity, and understanding that God's work is never done in isolation. See, the truth is we were never meant to build or even rebuild alone by ourselves. When things fall apart in our lives, when we see brokenness around us, when God calls us to step into something greater, he doesn't expect us to do it by ourselves. And I lost my spot. Oh, there we go. He calls us to do it together. And that's exactly what we see in Nehemiah 3. So when I was preparing for this message, I was like, I'm going to take a look at the chapter I got to read on. And literally, it is a list of names of who built the wall. And I'm like, God, how am I supposed to preach a message on a list of names? I'm like, thanks. You give me the hard one. But I literally had to pray on it for a couple days, and it was sitting there. I just got done my shower. I was actually coming here to church on a Sunday morning. God's like, in the shower, was like, I need you to preach on this, this, and this, these three things. And I'm like, interesting. And that was a couple days. Like, it took me a couple days of praying over it, and finally got hey, this is what I want you to preach on. See, when we look at this chapter, there's a powerful truth. When God calls us to restore what's broken, he calls us into community. Because rebuilding, whether it's a wall, a church, a family, or a life, was never meant to be done alone. And I have to admit, I really had to pray hard on this one today. Because like I said, when you read through Nehemiah 3, it's literally a bunch of names who helped build the wall and all the different sections that they built. So the key takeaway I believe that God really, really wanted us to pay attention to on this one is that God calls us to rebuild through the strength of community, where trust, diversity, and shared purpose create something stronger than we could achieve alone. And there are 3 ideas that I want to leave with you today in the understanding of this key takeaway. Acknowledge the need for help. Trust God and trust others. And embracing diversity in the community. So let's dive into the first point. Acknowledging the need for help. And Rudy is behind on the slides. We had this, so that's my kid back there. So we had this discussion, actually, I think it was yesterday? Friday night? Something like that, about him not paying attention and watching things on his phone and stuff like that instead of actually paying attention. I should have probably locked that thing, so he couldn't access his phone at all. I have a nice little feature on there that says, hey, I can lock his phone whenever I want. Should have just done that and pay attention. So let's go to the first point, Rudy. Acknowledging the need for help. There we go. He's already missed a couple of slides. All right, so let's take a step back and revisit what Nehemiah declared in Nehemiah 2:17 through 18. Joey preached on this last week. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem. And for any major rebuild, whether it's in our personal lives, relationships, or organizations, it's not a weakness to admit that we need help. It's actually wisdom. And I probably could just stop right there and be done. So, I could probably preach on that whole entire thing right there, that one sentence. It's not a weakness to admit we need help. It's wisdom. And Nehemiah understood this. As we move from chapter 2 into chapter 3, there's almost like a rallying cry by Nehemiah, an encouragement that God would make them prosper despite the opposition that they were seeing. See, Nehemiah knew that God would come through. He trusted the right people would be in the right place at the right time. Nehemiah 3 is a powerful example of teamwork. The chapter records different groups of people who stepped to repair the sections of the wall. And I won't read the entire chapter because I don't want you to fall asleep, but there are a few verses that I want to highlight with this unity, this help in action. So Nehemiah 3:1-2 says, Then Eliashib, the high priest, rose up with his brothers, the priests, and they built the sheep gate. They consecrated it and set its doors. They built as far as the Tower of the 100, as far as the Tower of Hanel, and then next to him the men of Jericho built. And next to him Zakur, the son of Imri, built. Nehemiah 3:8. Next to him, I'm going to butcher these names, Uzziel, the son of goldsmiths, repaired. Next to him, Hananiah, one of the perfumers, repaired, and they restored Jerusalem as far as the broad wall. Nehemiah 3:12 states, next to him, Shallum, the son of Hesh, the ruler of half the district of Jerusalem, repaired, and he and his daughters. Nehemiah 3:17 through 18 states, after him the Levites repaired. Rehum, the son of Bani, next to him Hashibah, whatever that was, ruler of half the district of Keilah, repaired for his district. And after their brothers repaired, Benu, the son of Henadad, ruler of half the district of Keilah. Nehemiah 3:28-29, above the horse gate the priests repaired, each one opposite of his own house. After them, Zadok, the son of Immer, repaired opposite his house. And after him, Shemaiah, the son of Shechaniah, the keeper of the east gate, repaired. So that's just 6-7 verses there of I think there's 32 total. Every section of the wall was rebuilt, not by Nehemiah alone, but by groups of people working side by side. And Nehemiah's vision would never have come to life without others stepping in to help. Ecclesiastes 4:9-10 states, 2 are better than 1, because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. So how many times do we walk by the broken walls in our own lives and do absolutely nothing? See, there were many people that looked at the broken walls of Jerusalem and just walked by and said, I'm going to do nothing about it. Maybe in your life, it's a relationship. Maybe it's an addiction. Maybe it's a health issue. What about your finances? We sometimes convince ourselves we can handle it alone. Or worse, we continue to tell ourselves the damage isn't that bad. But the truth is, nothing truly gets rebuilt until we first acknowledge the need for help. Think back to a time in your life when you actually did ask for help. I want you to really think. Maybe there's something that's just brand new in your life that you asked for help. Maybe there's something a long time ago. When you did reach out, you became vulnerable, invited somebody into your struggle. Maybe it was a friend, a mentor, or even God himself. I want you to think hard where you were in the state of your being. And now, I want you to look at where you're at today. Where are you today? That broken wall from years ago, maybe it was a month ago, maybe it was yesterday, I don't know. But that broken wall has started to heal. It's started to resemble a wall again. Sometimes we look at only what's broken in our lives, but I want you to really look at where have you been healed, or where are you currently healing? It's good to look at those things too. And it's most likely isn't in that state of healing because of something you did alone. It's because you invited God or somebody else into your life and trusted them and became vulnerable. And they helped you get to where you're at today. But being vulnerable is hard. It's super hard and it's super scary. It requires trust. It requires admitting that we can't fix everything ourselves. But when we let others in, when we allow the right voices to speak into our lives, we don't just repair what's broken. We grow stronger because of it. And that's what exactly Nehemiah understood. He wasn't a builder. He wasn't an expert. He wasn't anything great. He was the cupbearer for the king. He literally was just made sure that the drink that the king was going to drink wasn't poisonous. He protected the king's life. But he was just a man who saw a problem and had the courage to say, I can't do this alone, but it needs to be done. And because of that thought, that recognition, that determination to finally do something, people came together. Which brings me to my next point, trusting God and trusting others. So acknowledging the need for help is just the first step. The real challenge, learning to trust the ones that come alongside us. See, rebuilding the wall of Jerusalem was no small task. It required everybody working together, following Nehemiah's plan. So it's like a lot of new product development in a company. So I work for a manufacturer here in town, and whenever there's a new project, or a customer comes and says, hey, I want you to make this, there's a huge, long process that happens. So there's a contract that first has to happen. You have to say, yes, we're going to be able to do this or not be able to do this. There's an agreement on the cost. There's the scope of the project and a timeline. Then comes the feasibility study. You get a group together and say, hey, is this even feasible? Can we even do this? A kickoff meeting with all the key players that are going to be in the facility that's going to help make this project go well. And clear assignments outlining who is going to do exactly what and by when. The person managing this whole entire project places his or her trust in the team to follow through, staying within a budget and on schedule. See, Nehemiah's plan wasn't much different. He understood the project, he knew the goal, and he enlisted the right people to help. But above all, he trusted God to guide the process, where he said, the God of heaven will give us success. And I truly believe he placed his complete trust in God, and God gave him discernment on who to work with. And as we read through this whole entire chapter, we notice a pattern. People were assigned to work alongside their families and their communities. This wasn't just random. It wasn't just say, hey, this person go do over here, this person go over here, this person go over here. It was ensured, the way that this was completed was it ensured accountability and communal investment in their work. See, each group was responsible for repairing a specific portion of the wall that was not just for the city, but for their community. They were repairing portions of the wall that were near where they actually lived. But it wasn't all a storybook ending. It wasn't like, hey, we got all this together, and now we're rebuilding and everything. Remember I said there was opposition. Because not everybody came along for the ride. In Nehemiah 3, it says, and next to them the Tekoites repaired, but their nobles would not stoop to serve their Lord. Out of all the groups working to rebuild Jerusalem's walls, one group refused to build it. The nobles of Tekoa. Why? The text doesn't really speak to that. But many scholars suggest it was due to pride, status, or entitlement. These leaders saw themselves above the work, unwilling to submit to leadership or do the physical labor required. Matthew Henry's commentary suggests they believe their nobility exempted them from serving, when in reality, true leadership is about service, not status. See, Nehemiah doesn't ignore their refusal. He documents it. Isn't that kind of funny? So just like he honored everybody else that built the wall, he also wrote down who didn't build the wall. Why? Because he wanted to see that future generations would remember those who refused. Their inaction became a lasting reminder that leadership is not about position, it's about participation. When God calls us to rebuild, whether it's our faith, our families, or our purpose, not everyone will support the work. Not everybody's going to come along. Some will acknowledge the need, but refuse to lift a finger. These nobles did just that. While others worked hard to restore what was broken, they stood back, unwilling to engage. Because here's a hard truth. In your journey, in your rebuilding process, some people won't support what God is doing in your life. That's just a fact. There will be people that will not support you. They might be indifferent, they might be resistant, they might even actively discourage you. But that doesn't mean you stop. You don't stop rebuilding. It doesn't mean you waste your energy trying to convince them to come along either. Don't try to convince them. Don't try to fix them. Don't chase them. Just let them. Instead, be mindful on where you place your trust. Proverbs 3:5-6 states, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. And in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight." Nehemiah didn't let the nobles' refusal slow him down. He trusted God to bring the right people at the right time, and that is what happened. So as you rebuild, seek wisdom from God. Ask him to show you who is truly in your corner and who isn't. And when some people refuse to engage, let them disengage. It's okay. And it might be even really somebody super close to you, and it's going to be really, really hard. But let them disengage. It's okay. Because not everyone is meant to be a part of your journey. The ones who are, they'll be the ones picking up those bricks and starting to build with you. And here's the beauty of God's work. While some people may refuse to step up, he always provides the right people to help us rebuild. And it may not be something that you would even think of. And if you look at this chapter again, it's not just skilled builders who took part. It's priests, goldsmiths, merchants, and even daughters, women. God brings people together from all different backgrounds, professions, and walks of life to accomplish his purpose. This reminds us that rebuilding isn't a solo effort, it's a community effort. And sometimes the people God sends to us to help won't look like who we expected. And this leads to my last point, embracing diversity in community. When we look through this whole chapter of Nehemiah, we see a wide variety of people helping rebuild the wall. And this job wasn't reserved for skilled laborers or builders. It was a list of people, like I said before, goldsmiths, perfumers, priests, rulers, women. You name it, they were there. It shows that God is wise in how he uses a wide variety of people. And I want to point out a few of those people listed in this repair, which highlights this idea of diversity. The first person was in the first verse. He was a high priest. Along with his fellow priests, he helped rebuild the sheep gate, the entrance that was used for temple sacrifices. The priests typically oversaw spiritual matters and not physical labor. Being the first one on the list, Nehemiah made sure to set the stage of this whole entire project, saying these people, these priests helped build the wall. In Nehemiah 3:12, there was a significant little detail added. The daughters of Shalom helped. See, in ancient times, construction wasn't typically done by women. It was done by males. So Nehemiah here, making the importance of pointing out that women helped rebuild the wall was super countercultural at the time. And it's so important to show how God uses diversity in our community to help us rebuild. And then there was Baruch, the son of Zabai, who was mentioned that he zealously worked hard. While most people are just listed as repairing their sections, this person was purposely and intentionally picked out saying that he worked zealously. I mean, he was probably one of the hardest workers out of that whole entire list. And this guy's name meant blessed, and his enthusiasm sets him apart, enough for Nehemiah to call out his work ethic. Finally, there was Malchijah, who was listed in Nehemiah 3:11 and 31. He was a goldsmith by trade, but it was actually interesting because this person's name was actually in Ezra 10:31, because he was part of a community that was being called out for their sin. And here he is being called out for helping build the wall. So he was showing, that was being shown that he was being restored, that he was helping the rebuilding the process because he was called out for sin and he sought forgiveness and was brought back into the community. See, Nehemiah 3 paints a powerful picture of community, a group of vastly different people united in a single purpose. Some were leaders, some were outcasts, some worked zealously, and some broke cultural norms. But what mattered the most was that the work moved forward. See, we see the same pattern in Jesus' ministry. Just as Nehemiah recruited people from all different types of walks of life to rebuild the wall, he didn't choose only the religious elite, those society deemed qualified. Instead, he called fishermen like Peter and John, tax collectors like Matthew, and even a zealot like Simon, men from vastly different backgrounds. And not only that, Jesus elevated those that society overlooked. He welcomed women into his ministry, something that was unheard of the time. Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Susanna supported his work. That was in Luke 8, 1 through 3. And he entrusted the news of his resurrection to women first. That was in John 20, 17 through 18. And just as Shalom's daughters broke cultural expectations by working on the wall, Jesus affirmed the value of women in God's kingdom. And just like the person that was called out in his sin and repented, Jesus gave new purpose to outcasts and sinners. He dined with tax collectors, healed lepers, forgave prostitutes, calling them out not by their past, but how God saw them. See, God builds his kingdom through people from all walks of life, each bringing their unique strengths, experiences, and stories into his plan. In rebuilding the walls in our lives, we need diversity. Different ways of thinking, different backgrounds that challenge us to see beyond what we only can see. If we surrounded ourselves with those who think like us, act like us, dress like us, we create an echo chamber. And therefore, that's a space where only our opinions are validated. And they're constantly reinforced, which leaves absolutely no room for growth. And like the Tekoa priests, we may fail to see the need for restoration because we become too comfortable in our own little bubble. And that's why we've been so strong on embracing our community and getting out in our community. That's why like our mission group and stuff like that, we're making an intentionality to get out into our community so we get out of our bubble, so we can come alongside the community. And when we welcome trusted voices into our lives, we can remove our blinders and gain understanding and increase our ability to see and repair what is broken. So the question I want to ask, will we acknowledge our need for help and trust the diverse community God has placed around us, or are we going to continue to try to rebuild alone? See, God's plan always involves community, which help and trust each other. Proverbs 27:17 states, "Iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another." 1 Corinthians 12 through 14 says, "For just as the body is one and many members, all the members of the body, though many, are one body, so it is with Christ. For a one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, Jews or Greeks, slaves or free, and we're all made to drink of one Spirit. For the body does not consist of one member, but of many." Acts 2:42 through 44. And this is talking about the apostles and the people at the time right after Jesus was rose to heaven. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayers. And an awe came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together, and all had things in common. Galatians 6:2 says, "Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ." Matthew 18:20 says, "For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am among them." See, Connection Church, I consider this a safe church with a leadership team that cares deeply about every person here. We care more about the condition of your heart the number of people that are sitting in these seats. And a part of that care means breaking down the barriers, just as Nehemiah did when he challenged the culture, and just as Jesus did when he redefined what leadership looked like. See, God has never been about power, position, or exclusivity. It has always been about people. And true leadership isn't about being domineering. It's about service. It's about humility and lifting others up. And that's exactly what Jesus did, and that's exactly what Nehemiah did here. We live in a world that often defines leadership through control, power, and manipulative tactics. But God calls us to model something that is completely different, where everyone has a place and your voice is heard, and we build together side by side. So my question to you, and this is going to probably be a weird question for some, but probably might be okay for some. So how's your heart today? What's been weighing on you lately? Or where do you feel God working on in your life? I want to encourage you to dig deep, like way below the surface. Sometimes as a church, we like to just do the surface level things, like, here's steps 1, 2, 3, have a nice day, and that's it. But I want you to dig deep. Like, how are you truly feeling right now? Like, what about this message asks you to probe a little bit deeper to say, okay, what portions of my life that need to be rebuilt? Where do I need to come along with other people right now or bring other people in my life? Like, I want you to encourage you to dig deep, like way below the surface, not just physically, but spiritually and emotionally, wholeheartedly seeking after God to understand the condition of your heart. I want to encourage you today. I really, really do. You don't need to carry the weight of rebuilding alone. Nehemiah understood that rebuilding this whole entire wall, although they did it fast, they did it in 52 days. Like, they did it super, super quick. But you don't need to carry the weight of rebuilding anything alone. Just as Nehemiah sought God first, knowing the task was too big for him to complete by himself, we are created to lean on God and the community that He has placed around us. And before you leave today, I just want you to make it a point to just prayerfully seek after God to examine your wall. If you feel called, you can talk to me. Autumn's here, Joey, Katrina, different board members of the teaching and equipping team here, or even if you have a trusted friend here that you feel comfortable talking to. Acknowledge what's broken. It's okay to acknowledge that you need help. It's wisdom that you need help. And it might be something small, it might be something big, but it doesn't matter. God wants to hear it all. God wants you to be restored. And trust that God will provide the right people in your life. So my prayer to you today is that God would open your eyes to see what's broken and needing repair, to give you the courage to ask for help, and He'll surround you with the right people. People who may not look or even act like you would be expecting to look like. But those are the people that you truly need. Because rebuilding is never meant to be done alone. So, will you trust Him in the process? And will you let Him lead the way? I'm going to finish off with prayer. And while I'm praying, if there's something that's stirring in your heart, I just want you to let God speak to you this morning before you leave. So, God, I just thank you for this time together. I just want to take a couple moments of silence. I just want to have everybody here just ask, God, point out areas of my life that I need you in. God, you know every heart here. You know every soul. You know what's going through everybody's mind right now. It might be a physical ailment, an emotional ailment, a distant relationship, an addiction, finances. Lord, you know where everybody's heart is right now. Lord, I pray that we can be a church that comes alongside everybody here and can just sit in the mud with them. We can help prop them up, knowing that they do not have to go through what they're going through alone. Lord, you are a God of restoration. There is nothing in this world that is too difficult for you. You are the God of impossibilities. You make everything possible. Lord, I pray for restoration in people's lives that need restoration, Lord. Help them navigate this in a way that is healthy, that establishes boundaries, that makes you more alive and real in their lives. Lord, I pray that we can be a church that continues to point to you, Lord, that we continue to be a church that has big hearts, Lord, to come alongside everybody in this congregation who's ever watching on live stream, alongside our community, and can just uplift and proclaim your name over their lives. Lord, I pray for everybody here right now. Lord, I pray for this week, Lord, that they are just more in tune with you and more in tune with the community that you have surrounded us, Father God, with. Thank you. I lift everybody up in prayer, and I pray that they are wholly encouraged this morning to just continue to seek after you and continue to have this camaraderie of community that you have surrounded us with, because everybody here is so awesome in their own unique, diverse ways, and everybody has a voice here. Everybody has a seat at the table because of you. And I praise you, and I thank you. In Jesus Christ's name I pray. Amen. Have a great week, everybody.